My son told my wife that she deserved more than me and cheated on me, and for her betrayal I down her gallery. As I sat at my desk, my mind strayed to the 25 years that have passed since Sarah and I were married. I started thinking back on our honeymoon and those magical times that still make me happy, feeling both thankful and nostalgic as I think back on our trip to Tahiti with Sarah. It was a magical chapter that I will always treasure. It seemed as though we had stepped into a dream as soon as we landed, leaving behind the daily grind and discovering an inexplicable tranquility. We were surrounded by breathtaking beauty as we strolled along Bora Bora Beach, the sand beneath our feet and the waters whispering secrets. The lovely aroma of gardenia pervaded the air, reminding us all the time of the peace and love that surrounded us. But more than simply the gorgeous surroundings contributed to how unforgettable our honeymoon was. What mattered most were the shared experiences. Finding secret waterfalls and strolling through verdant woodlands was like unearthing nature's jewels. We were all in awe of the strength and beauty of our surroundings. The views from our Moria cliffside refuge appeared to continue on forever. Every sunset created a kaleidoscope of hues in the sky, and when we embraced, love and devotion flooded our beings. With candlelit dinners on the beach beneath a starry sky and the smell of fresh fish and regional specialties, the evenings resembled a beautiful symphony. The sparkle of love in Sarah's eyes was what really made it magical. Tahiti became more than simply a location, it became the center of our love tale, full of treasured memories and fantasies. It reminds me of the great beauty and depth of our connection to think back to our honeymoon. It brought back our love, bolstered our relationship, and brought us moments of happiness and tranquility. I am so grateful for these memories, and I cherish them as I reflect on that paradise 25 years later. My secretary saw me staring out the window as I was lost in contemplation. It dawned on me that I had been happy and smiling for 3 weeks. After all these years, my wife had shown me such love and care, and I felt valued and loved once more. I was excited to spend more time with her. Acting like a teenage girl in love, it seemed like a second honeymoon. I didn't want my newly discovered joy to end. Though my marriage to Sarah is solid, 25 years can convert enthusiasm into boredom. Nevertheless, Sarah had been remarkably loving, pursuing closeness virtually every evening and igniting aspects of our bond that had been dormant for years. I never thought her feelings were intended for anything other than to rekindle our marriage. I made the decision to treat her to a special evening. Grinning, I left work early to get up 4 dozen roses, her favorite wine, and almonds coated in chocolate. I wanted to show her how much I cared by surprising her with a 12-night cruise to commemorate our enduring love tonight. I went up the kitchen stairs after entering the house from the garage. I looked around the table and saw our 24-year-old son, Alex, seated instead of Sarah. I asked where his mother was. Alex had a heart-to-heart talk with his mother 3 weeks prior. Sarah talked about how much she loved John and how afraid she was that he would suffer if she followed her heart. After all these years, Alex comforted her. John loved her very much and would understand that she needed something else. Sarah was reminded by him that John was not getting any younger and that she could probably count on him to support her needs, even if it meant giving in to this one-time treat. Sarah said she felt it was hard to tell John that she was going on a date with someone else and that she couldn't face him. Alex promised his mother that James would be waiting for her and offered to handle things. Dinner was to be served at 8:00 p.m., and Sarah would be prepared to go when John got home at 7:00 p.m. While his mother was out on a date, Alex would fill his father in on everything. Sarah accepted the plan but harbored strong reservations because she thought it was improper to go out with a different man. Alex comforted her, telling her to tell John how much she loved him in the 2 weeks before the date, so he wouldn't have to worry about anything. The goal of the plan was a little fun and new friendships, not love. Alex encouraged Sarah to get in touch with John and resume their romance when he gave her an update that night. John would be happy to have her return. John has always shown his love and support for her by being willing to go above and beyond. Sarah agreed, despite her misgivings, that going on a date wouldn't imply she was going to dump John in favor of someone else. It should be no difficulty to enjoy a good night out 25 years later. Up until the date night, she was determined to tell John how amazing he was and how much she loved him. She was going to make him the happiest man alive when she returned. Alex reassured his mother that John was a wonderful man who would provide her with this unique experience, and he urged her to show him love and appreciation. And with that, Alex went home to prepare Jake's dinner. After Sarah thanked him, Alex made fun of her grandkids. Alex said that they had discussed it earlier and that they intended to begin working on it within the next several months. Isolated in the art studio that John had constructed for her, Sarah tackled her most recent effort. Her thoughts of being with another man had been impeding her creativity. But then she remembered Alex's words, and all of a sudden her brushes danced across the canvas, bringing vivid colors and poignant scenes to life. Feeling secure in her decision to look after herself, Sarah experienced a sense of relief from her guilt. She thought she could show John how much she loved him, how wonderful he had been a father and spouse. That night, as part of her plan to show him all her love, Sarah showered, fixed her hair, and put on his favorite baby doll nightgown. Sarah greeted John on his way home, took him to the bedroom, undressed him, and shocked him with a long-ago neglected act of passion. She was dressed in heels and a nightgown. She made him feel good in a manner he hadn't felt in years. Sarah was overcome with warmth and delight when she saw John's smile, and she began to question why she hadn't taken action earlier. John asked what the occasion was, saying it was the finest welcome home he had had in a long time. All Sarah wanted to do was tell him how much she loved him and how unique he was. Their intimacy was the most fulfilling they had felt in a long time, and it made Sarah reconsider her intentions to see James. Their bond became stronger over the ensuing weeks. John brightened up, grinning, laughing, and displaying love all the time. Sarah started to second-guess her planned date night, as she was in a better place than she had been in a long time. She even talked to Alex about the improvements, wondering if she really needed to carry out her initial intentions. Alex suggested that they reevaluate the matter in 2 weeks and encouraged his mother to keep basking in the newfound love and devotion. He said that she could always postpone the date if necessary, but he also warned her that this opportunity might not present itself again. Sarah reconsidered and asked Alex for more information about James. James was the father of Alex's friend, and Sarah wanted to understand his background better. Alex explained that when James' wife Linda was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor, James took a leave of absence from work to care for her until she passed away. Linda had been the center of his world, and her death left him deeply shattered. He withdrew from social life, immersing himself in work to cope with his grief. When Alex and Linda encouraged him to start dating again, James confessed that he felt lost without his wife and unsure how to begin a new relationship. This gave Alex the idea that introducing James to his mother might be beneficial for both of them. Alex described James' profound respect for Sarah and his desire for companionship. He recounted their conversation, emphasizing James' excitement at the prospect of meeting her. Alex assured his mother that James held her in high esteem and was eager to spend time with her. He offered to share her contact information with James so they could arrange a meeting. Despite the age difference, Alex was confident they would connect well. James needed someone to talk to and bond with, and Alex believed his mother could provide the support and friendship James was seeking. The next day, James reached out to Sarah. Their conversation was delightful, and he invited her to spend time together. When he complimented her photo and expressed his anticipation, she felt a surge of excitement. The prospect of doing something new, combined with his kind words, gave her a sense of thrill. She agreed to meet him and looked forward to it. Although James offered to pick her up, she preferred to meet him at the restaurant. They began texting each other daily, with their exchanges becoming increasingly playful as the meeting day approached. As the day of their meeting drew closer, Sarah's text messages to James would have failed any test of loyalty. She was filled with excitement, imagining the upcoming encounter. Despite this, she made an effort not to neglect John and focused more on their intimate moments each evening. John walked around with a perpetual smile, while Sarah felt a renewed sense of desire. This heightened level of connection exceeded her expectations. Alex had a deep admiration for his mother, believing she was an extraordinary woman. He was proud of the person she had become and regretted not spending more time with her during his upbringing. He had worked hard to provide a good life and had always tried to be present for her as much as possible. When he saw her, he smiled, but was also a bit surprised. Alex greeted his father, placing down the 24 roses, a bottle of wine, and a box of chocolates. He had planned a special surprise for Sarah that evening and was eager to see her reaction. From his jacket pocket, Alex produced travel plans and tickets for a 7-day cruise. He was excited to take Sarah away and couldn't wait to see her face light up with joy. He instructed John not to mention anything to her upon her arrival, as he wanted to keep the surprise intact. The sound of Alex calling him Dad always brought a smile to John's face, reminding him of the days when Alex was a little boy sitting on his lap. However, something seemed off this time. Tears welled up in Alex's eyes, and he appeared deeply troubled by what he needed to convey. Alex asked his father to sit down, indicating that they needed to have an important conversation. He began by mentioning how much Sarah loved him and how wonderful things had been between them recently. John affirmed his love for Sarah and his desire to show her how much she meant to him. Seeing Alex's tears, John sensed that the news was not what he had expected. Alex then revealed that Sarah had gone out with another man. John sat in stunned silence, trying to process Alex's revelation. As Alex's tears continued to flow, a wave of anger and betrayal washed over John. The news left him in shock, grappling with the implications for their marriage and the trust that had been broken. John demanded to know where his wife was, his frustration rising. Alex, trying to stay calm, explained that Sarah loved him very much, didn't want to hurt him. She had gone out with another man and wouldn't be back until the next day. Sarah couldn't bring herself to tell John directly, so she asked Alex to break the news. It was just one night and she would be back soon. John found it hard to believe. He couldn't accept that his wife would betray him like this, especially since they had been so close and loving. He struggled to process the situation, feeling a mix of disbelief and anger. Alex tried to explain that Sarah needed something different in her life after 25 years of marriage. She believed nothing would change between them and hoped that John would understand and perhaps love her even more for it. John stared at his son, feeling a wave of betrayal. He couldn't understand why Alex was involved in this situation. Sarah had always been close to Alex, sharing everything with him. When Sarah felt the spark in her marriage was fading, she confided in Alex. Alex, in turn, introduced her to James, his friend's father, who had lost his wife a few years ago and needed companionship. Feeling a surge of anger, John abruptly stood up, knocking over his chair. He was furious that Alex had set up his mother on a date with another man. He paced the kitchen, struggling to comprehend the situation and demanding answers from Alex. He admitted to arranging the date, thinking he was helping a friend, but John saw it as a betrayal of their family. Alex explained that Sarah and James had gone to a restaurant and planned to spend the night together, but she would be back the next day. Sarah had been expressing her love for John over the past 2 weeks and didn't want to hurt him. She thought John would understand and give her this one chance. However, John felt that Sarah's recent affection was just a way to ease her guilt, leaving him feeling betrayed and angry. Alex tried to assure his father that Sarah never intended to hurt him and that she genuinely loved him. Sarah had talked about looking forward to their retirement and spending time with their future grandchildren, as Alex and Jake planned to have kids. But John found it ironic that those dreams seemed shattered now. Alex mentioned that James was a nice man, hoping John would understand. But John couldn't accept being friends with the man dating his wife. The sarcasm and bitterness in his thoughts reflected his deep pain. Alex realized the gravity of his mistake, feeling the weight of his father's anger and disappointment. John demanded to know where his wife was, his voice rising with frustration and anger. Alex, trying to maintain his composure, explained that Sarah loved him very much and had been unable to break the news herself. She had gone out with another man and wouldn't be back until the next day. Sarah couldn't bring herself to tell John directly, so she had asked Alex to step in and explain. It was only for one night, and she would return soon, Alex assured him. John found the situation hard to believe. He struggled to accept that his wife would betray him like this, especially after all the years they had spent together, being so close and loving. The disbelief mixed with rising anger as he tried to process what Alex was telling him. Alex attempted to clarify that Sarah needed something different in her life after 25 years of marriage. She didn't want to change anything permanently between them and hoped that John would understand and perhaps even appreciate her more for it. John stared at his son, feeling a deep sense of betrayal. He couldn't comprehend why Alex was involved in this situation. Sarah had always been close to Alex, sharing everything with him. When Sarah felt that the spark in her marriage was fading, she had confided in Alex. In response, Alex introduced her to James, his friend S. father, who had lost his wife a few years ago and was in need of companionship. The surge of anger within John grew uncontrollable, causing him to stand up abruptly and knock over his chair. He was furious that Alex had set up his mother on a date with another man. He paced the kitchen, trying to wrap his head around the situation and demanding answers from Alex. Alex admitted to arranging the date, thinking he was helping a friend in need, but John saw it as a deep betrayal of their family. Alex explained that Sarah and James had gone to a restaurant and planned to spend the night together. She would be back the next day. Sarah had been showing her love for John over the past 2 weeks, not wanting to hurt him. She thought John would understand and give her this one chance. However, John felt that Sarah's recent affection was just a way to ease her guilt, leaving him feeling even more betrayed and angry. Alex tried to reassure his father that Sarah never intended to hurt him and that she genuinely loved him. Sarah had been looking forward to their retirement and spending time with their future grandchildren as Alex and Jane planned to have kids. But now, John found it bitterly ironic that those dreams seemed shattered. Alex mentioned that James was a nice man, hoping John would understand, but John couldn't accept being friends with the man dating his wife. The sarcasm and bitterness in his thoughts reflected his deep pain. Alex realized the magnitude of his mistake, feeling the heavy weight of his father's anger and disappointment. John kicks his son out. He forbids him to speak to him at all. Alex broke down, his face buried in his hands, tears streaming uncontrollably. He begged, insisting he loved his father and wanted to stay the night as planned. Both he and his mother didn't want John to be alone. John's heart was hardened, the words barely registering. He felt a deep betrayal, questioning if Alex had ever truly respected or loved him as a father. To John, it seemed he was just a provider, never truly valued by his wife or son. Amidst the sobs, Alex continued to plead for his father to reconsider, to allow Sarah the chance to explain everything the following day. He reminded his father of their 25 years of marriage, the love they shared, and implored him to give his mother this one opportunity. But John was resolute. Sarah could have whatever she wanted, but she would never have him again. Forgiveness was beyond reach, and everyone involved would face the consequences, including the man who had taken his wife. He ordered Alex to leave, saying nothing would change for him with his mother. Alex was no longer his son. Overwhelmed by his father's rejection, Alex left the house, consumed by a pain he had never felt before. He had never imagined his father's reaction would be so harsh. For the first time, he realized the gravity of his actions in helping his mother. John's fury was palpable, and Alex could only hope for eventual forgiveness. As soon as Alex left, John tried calling Sarah repeatedly, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He left several messages, his voice trembling as he begged her to return and explain. Despite his repeated attempts, even after a few drinks, there was no response. By 1 a.m., it became clear that she wasn't coming back or answering his calls. Exhausted and desolate, he stared blankly at the TV, unable to focus on anything but his crumbling life. His world had turned into a nightmare. The past 25 years of his marriage flashing before his eyes, the highs, the lows, the milestones, and the intimacy that had become routine. The realization that those moments had lost their meaning left him feeling empty and betrayed. Looking out at the art studio he had built for Sarah, a place where she had spent 2 decades nurturing her creativity, John felt a sharp pang of insignificance. Though he had always been proud of her accomplishments, he now felt sidelined, realizing that the studio held more importance to her than he did. The conversation with Alex had struck him deeply, revealing that Sarah wanted to be with another man. Despite all his efforts to support his family, he had failed to notice her growing unhappiness. The fact that she had confided in Alex instead of him only fueled his anger and humiliation. Reflecting on his life, home, and future, John remembered the house and property he had inherited from his grandfather, which remained solely in his name before their marriage, with no mortgage. Fueled by a mix of alcohol and rage, he began to plot ways to hurt Sarah as she had hurt him. Staring out at her studio, a surge of determination washed over him. Whether driven by the alcohol or the pain of betrayal, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. John began making trips to their bedroom, gathering all of Sarah's belongings and moving them to the studio. Shoes, clothes, jewelry, all were piled in the center of the room. He then collected photo albums, including their wedding pictures, and placed them on top of the heap. He retrieved items from the attic, including her wedding dress and baby clothes, adding them to the growing pile. It amazed him how much she had accumulated over the years. He took down her pictures from the walls and tossed them onto the heap. Sculptures, sketches, and all her cherished possessions were now part of the ever-expanding mound. By 4:00 a.m. He was tense but determined to wait until 5:00 a.m. to confront Sarah. I made the decision to give Sarah one last chance to answer my texts and calls. By 5:00 a.m., if I had not heard back, I would follow through on my plan. I made sure she had everything she needed transferred inside the studio. I went to the studio at 4:30 a.m. and got a 15-gallon gasoline can from the garage. I took out cash from the safe, moved money to my personal account, canceled our joint credit cards online, packed a few luggage, and loaded them into my truck in the interim. I was going to withdraw until my lawyer could resolve the matter. Granted a further 10 minutes, I bided my time until 5:10 a.m. When she didn't reply, I doused her possessions with gasoline and along the walls of the studio. I inhaled deeply, struck a match, and lit everything on fire. In just a few minutes, the fire consumed everything, lighting up the street. The enormity of what I had done struck me as I was driving away. As I accepted the fact that, like the studio, my once happy marriage had burned to the ground, tears flowed down my face. Unexpectedly, the fire had moved to the back porch, posing a threat to the house. Firefighters, who responded quickly, prevented the house from being completely destroyed, but they did cause substantial smoke damage and would need a lot of work before it could be occupied once more. I paid cash for a room at a motel 70 miles away from the ruins of my previous life. Stay hidden. Feeling stressed and fatigued, I switched off my phone and went to bed, sleeping soundly till midday. Upon awakening, I discovered numerous unanswered phone calls and texts from Alex, Sarah, and the police. The narrative of Sarah. Excited and frightened at the same time, Sarah stepped out of the lift and greeted James at the restaurant. Her stunning navy dress, transparent stockings, and matching heels caught the gorgeous man's eye as he kindly greeted her at the registration desk. His eyes gave her more self-assurance. She had been in the salon for hours earlier, getting her hair and makeup just so for this night. She wanted the evening to be exhilarating, remarkable, and perfect. His response gave her comfort. They went to the pub after she gave him a tender kiss. Sarah sat on the bar stools and felt James' eyes follow her movements. As he placed their drink order, they grinned at each other. She switched off her phone so that she could enjoy every second without any distractions. There was no denying their chemistry. Sarah found herself reaching out to stroke his arm and flirting more audaciously than she had in years, even with John, as they conversed like old friends. She was going to enjoy the night to the fullest and embrace her confidence. The hostess showed them to their seats and told them their table was ready after their second drink. There was a lot of laughter and lively chat during the delicious dinner. She teasingly slipped her foot between his legs as James inquired if she still wanted to stay the night. With a wider smile, he proposed that they part ways. He guided her to his reserved hotel room while holding hands. The reality of what she was about to do struck her as the 12th floor elevator doors opened, and she had a momentary thought of John. James sensed her uncertainty, drew her in close, and planted a comforting, soft kiss on her lips. All thoughts of her husband and marriage vanished in that instant. She was his tonight, and she was prepared to welcome and savor this moment. James hastily unfastened Sarah's dress as soon as he entered the room, allowing it to drop to the ground. He got naked quickly. He turned her around, appreciating her shape, took off her bra, and laid her down softly on the bed. For Sarah, it was a momentary getaway from her daily existence, filled with immense passion and liberty. The night had been an overwhelming blend of passion and desire. Sarah marveled at James' physique as he removed her pantyhose, keeping her heels on at his request, which he found enticing. Throughout their encounter, he lavished her with kisses, demonstrating a skill that left her breathless. Though fleeting thoughts of John attempted to surface, she pushed them away, concentrating on the man before her. James' unexpected declaration of affection deeply moved her, bringing forth a torrent of emotions and tears of joy. Their night was filled with multiple passionate encounters, each one as intense as the last. It was the peak of her sexual experiences, leaving her satisfied and content with her decision to be with James. In the morning, bathed in sunlight filtering through the curtains, James kissed her tenderly and caressed her hair, reiterating his feelings. He expressed a desire to see her again, but Sarah was gripped by apprehension. She gently acknowledged the incredible time they had shared, but emphasized that it was a one-time experience due to her marriage. Despite James' pleas, she firmly maintained her stance, sealing her words with another deep kiss. Despite the profound connection with James, Sarah's commitment to John loomed large in her mind. After breakfast, James drove her home. She decided to turn on her phone, which had been off since the previous night. To her dismay, it was flooded with missed calls and texts. John S. messages struck her the hardest, filling her with a sharp sense of guilt. The realization of his suffering brought tears to her eyes. Just as they neared her neighborhood, her phone rang. It was Alex, urgently inquiring about her whereabouts. She reassured him that she was almost home, only to learn about a fire at their house. They had been trying to reach her all night, but her phone had been off. Her immediate concern shifted to John, who, according to Alex, was missing. No one knew his whereabouts, and he wasn't responding to calls. With a sinking heart, she promised to call back as soon as she arrived, deeply troubled by the unfolding events. When James turned onto her street, she saw fire trucks and police in front of her house. Although the front of the house appeared undamaged, she quickly approached the firefighters to understand what had happened. She was informed that the firefighters had managed to save the house, but the back porch was damaged, and the house couldn't be occupied until the smoke was cleared. The most significant damage was to the small studio behind their home. It had been completely destroyed. Stunned by the news, Sarah felt her legs buckle, and James caught her, helping her sit on the curb. The realization that her studio was gone left her in shock. The firefighter explained that an investigation into the cause of the fire would follow, but in the meantime, a police detective had questions for her. Quickly gathering herself, Sarah rushed to the back of the house before the detective, Sergeant Brooks, could reach her. He caught up to her as she stood before the charred remains of her studio, her heart sinking. With no idea of what had transpired, having been away the previous night, Sarah felt the devastation around her mirrored the turmoil inside as she grappled with the ramifications of her actions and the impact they had on her life. The scene was chaotic, as Sarah stood by the remnants of her studio, feeling a mix of dread and confusion. The officer turned to James and asked if he was her husband. Embarrassed, James clarified that he was just a friend. The officer's suspicion was evident as he turned back to Sarah, inquiring about her husband's whereabouts. Sarah, her voice trembling, admitted she didn't know where John was and that he wasn't answering his phone. When questioned about her whereabouts the previous night, Sarah admitted she had been at a hotel with James, realizing how incriminating it sounded. The officer continued his inquiry, asking if she and her husband were separated. She stammered, insisting they were happily married, despite how foolish it seemed after admitting to spending the night with another man. The sergeant pressed for John's location, but Sarah had no answers, feeling increasingly desperate. Overwhelmed by anger and fear, Sarah accepted the sergeant's business card, promising to contact him if she reached John. She was angry about the loss of her studio and fearful of John's reaction and what this meant for their marriage. Desperate to find him, she called Alex. Alex hadn't heard from his father since the previous night and revealed that John had thrown him out, declaring he was no longer his son. The severity of John's words sent a chill through Sarah. Entering the house, Sarah was met with smoke-damaged walls and a foul odor. Living there was impossible in its current state. As she moved through the house, intending to gather clothes and personal items, she was shocked to find everything gone. Panic surged as she realized all her clothes, shoes, and personal belongings were missing. Her wedding rings, which she had foolishly left behind, were also gone. The thought of John seeing the rings and thinking she had abandoned their marriage horrified her. In a state of panic, Sarah searched every room but found nothing of hers. A dreadful thought crossed her mind. Had John truly destroyed everything? Rushing out of the house, she returned to the studio to examine the remnants. Among the debris, she spotted picture frames and partially destroyed clothing, confirming her fears. John had not just accepted her absence, but had obliterated everything important to her, effectively cutting her out of his life. Calling Alex in tears, Sarah recounted what had happened and expressed her need for a place to stay. James quickly offered her a place, but he was the last person she wanted to see. Politely, she declined, explaining she needed to be alone and asked him to leave. Hurt by her abruptness, James left, leaving Sarah to regret her actions and the man she had spent the night with. Though she knew she was at fault, she couldn't help but blame James for her betrayal, even though the true blame lay with her. Sarah called Alex again, sobbing, admitting she thought she had lost John. Alex tried to reassure her, but Sarah was overwhelmed by the realization that John had burned everything: her clothes, paintings, and studio. He had left her with nothing, not even a place to live. He was ignoring her calls, and Sarah felt the full weight of her actions. She lamented not talking to John and instead going on that date. She believed they could have worked things out, but her selfishness had driven him away. Now she had no home and no clothes. Alex shared in the blame and offered Sarah a place to stay until the house was repaired. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she realized the extent of the damage she had caused. Alex assured her they would get her new clothes that afternoon and make sure she was taken care of, but the pain of her actions and their consequences weighed heavily on her. By evening, Sarah was overwhelmed with grief and despair as she reflected on the extent of her loss. It wasn't just her clothes that had been taken from her. All of her artwork, including paintings and sculptures, had been destroyed. Decades of artistic creation and 25 years of marriage had been obliterated. She felt isolated and desolate, with nothing left to cling to. Her sobs were loud and unrestrained, drawing curious and sympathetic looks from neighbors. As she attempted to regain her composure, her phone rang. It was John. Her hands trembled as she struggled to answer, nearly dropping the phone in her anxiety. She finally connected the call, her voice filled with hope and fear. John's voice, however, was cold and unwavering. He informed her that he was aware of everything, thanks to Alex. He made it clear that both she and their son were dead to him and indicated that this conversation might be their last. John stated that he was moving forward with divorce proceedings and would meet with lawyers on Monday. Sarah begged for a chance to explain, expressing her love and pleading for an opportunity to reconcile. She mentioned the destruction of her studio, hoping for some sympathy. But John laid the blame squarely on her shoulders, citing her betrayal and the sight of her discarded wedding rings as the final straw. He declared her actions unforgivable and was shocked by Alex's involvement. He reiterated that their relationship was over and that any future communication would be through lawyers. With that, he ended the call, leaving Sarah devastated. After ending the call, Alex arrived. They held each other, both crying over their shared loss. Realizing they couldn't stay in the damaged house while the fire and police conducted their investigation, they decided to go to Alex's home. When they arrived, Alex explained the situation to Jake, who was stunned by the details. Jake was furious upon learning that Alex had arranged for her mother to meet another man, abandoning John. He couldn't comprehend how Alex had thought this would be acceptable. He expressed his anger and disappointment, questioning their future together and putting their plans for children on hold until he could understand her actions. Alex was taken aback by Jake's reaction, unable to understand his lack of empathy for her mother's situation. She had believed it was just a single date after 30 years of marriage, but now she realized the true gravity of her actions, the dissolution of her parents' marriage, her father's pain, and her mother's despair. They would all have to face the repercussions of her decisions. 5 days later, John returned to the house to evaluate the damage. He decided not to file an insurance claim to avoid further complications. During a meeting with his lawyer, he insisted that the house was his and would not be contested. He agreed to give Sarah half of their savings but refused to pay alimony. If she resisted, he would file for adultery, exposing her affair with her friend S. father. Divorce proceedings were already underway, and John sought legal advice on possible arson charges, though he learned that without an insurance claim, the case would likely not proceed unless he filed a false report. A neighbor who recognized Alex noticed John returning home and promptly informed her. Alex rushed back to the scene, bracing herself for the confrontation and the full extent of the fallout from their actions. After surveying the damage to the house, I was deep in thought about the necessary repairs when I heard the front door open. Alex's voice echoed through the house, calling out for me. I remained silent, focused on assessing the destruction. Gazing out the window at the pile of ashes that was once Sarah's studio, I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. Alex eventually found me in one of the bedrooms and rushed over, wrapping me in a hug. I stayed emotionless, my mind made up. Despite Alex's pleas for forgiveness, I couldn't bring myself to respond with anything but cold detachment. The betrayal by Sarah and Alex had cut too deep. I insisted they leave me alone, reiterating that Alex was no longer my child in my eyes. Alex tried to persuade me by talking about Sarah's remorse and constant crying, but the image of Sarah leaving her wedding rings behind and spending the night with another man was too powerful to overcome. I made it clear that our marriage had ended the moment she chose her lover over our family. Alex persisted, asking if I was really willing to throw away 25 years of happiness. I clarified that it was not me who had thrown it away, it was Sarah and Alex with their actions. I ordered Alex to leave, feeling nothing but a grim resolve. As Alex ran out of the house in tears for the second time, I felt a twisted sense of closure. The following day, Sarah received the divorce papers and realized that her affair had definitively ended our marriage. Despite her attempts to reason with me, attend counseling, and reach out, I remained steadfast in my decision to cut off contact with both her and Alex. Jake eventually reached out, expressing his anger and disappointment over their actions, reconsidering having children due to Alex's betrayal. They entered couples counseling in an effort to save their marriage. Sarah had hoped to return home after I rebuilt it, but the divorce made it clear that the house was mine. She received half our savings and $2,500 per month in alimony for 5 years, despite my initial refusal to pay. Forced to find work after 25 years of relying on me, Sarah moved from Alex's place to a small apartment near the city center and started working at an art gallery to make ends meet. Sarah's artistic freedom was suddenly constrained. No longer could she spend hours in the beautiful studio I had built for her, or enjoy the lake view from the large windows. Work now consumed her, leaving little time to reclaim her old life. All the luxury and marital bliss had vanished because of one reckless night with another man. She realized that no amount of tears could erase the hurt caused by that single mistake. I, her former husband, would never speak to her again. The news that I had disowned Alex shattered Alex's heart, plunging him into depression over our family's split. To save his own marriage, now on the brink of collapse, Alex sought help from a therapist. Months later, after the house was repaired, I kept up with the court-ordered payments and eventually sold the house. When Sarah attempted to reconcile, she found a young couple at the door of what used to be our home. The woman, surprised to see Sarah, informed her that I had sold the house and moved on. The kindness the new owners spoke of was a stark contrast to the cold finality I had shown Sarah. Standing at the threshold of her former life, Sarah realized just how completely things had changed and how permanent her losses were. Back in her solitary apartment, Sarah opened the letter with trembling hands, dreading the contents. The message from John was bitter and final, making it clear he once thought he could be the husband she needed, but now saw her actions as proof that she craved excitement beyond their marriage. He felt betrayed by her pretense of being a loving wife for 2 weeks, viewing it as a calm before her ultimate act of infidelity. While he had been planning a special night for them, she had been with another man, shattering his trust. John expressed that her betrayal had not only broken their marriage, but obliterated it completely. He informed her that he had left to start anew in a place where neither she nor their son Alex existed. He had sold their home, seeing it as another casualty of her selfishness, and hoped the new owners could cleanse it of the betrayal stain. His letter ended with a sarcastic wish for her new beginnings, implying they would be as fleeting as her loyalty. The reality of John S. words hit Sarah hard. She sobbed uncontrollably, realizing the thrill and memories of her time with James were now overshadowed by profound regret and sorrow. At 52, alone and filled with remorse, Sarah saw her future without John as bleak and empty. She had traded a stable, loving life for a fleeting moment of reckless pleasure. In the meantime, John had one final act to settle before leaving his past behind. Late one night, just as James was preparing to leave for Ecuador, John stormed into his home, revealing himself as the wronged husband. James attempted to justify his actions, claiming ignorance of the full situation. But John was beyond listening. Months of suppressed anger and hurt erupted violently. Wielding a crowbar, John ensured James would never forget the confrontation. He left James with a dire warning about the dangers of involving oneself with a married woman before departing for the airport. By the time James reached the emergency room and reported the assault, John had already settled into his new beachfront apartment in Manabí, Ecuador. Detectives learned of his departure 2 weeks later, realizing they couldn't pursue him since Ecuador does not extradite for assault charges. James faced a long recovery, spending weeks in the hospital and enduring months of physical therapy. The 25 stitches across his face would forever remind him of that fateful night. His future now uncertain, James understood that his old life was over, forever altered by his involvement with Sarah. He cut all ties with Sarah and Alex, disappearing from their lives. Alex faced his own turmoil as Jake nearly left him due to the scandal. Counseling helped Alex understand the gravity of his mistakes. He promised Jake that he would remain faithful and committed to their future. Jake needed 2 years to regain trust before deciding to have children, ensuring that Alex wouldn't repeat his past deceptions. John severed all ties with Alex, his actions leading to a permanent estrangement from his father. When Sarah and Alex learned about the assault on James, they were filled with guilt and heartache, realizing their roles in the unfolding violence and the destruction of their family. Their decisions had far-reaching consequences they had never anticipated. The misguided belief that allowing Sarah a single indiscretion would preserve their happiness was completely wrong. Their actions had led to the irreparable collapse of their family and any semblance of joy they once had. The aftermath of the betrayal revealed the harsh reality that happiness was an illusion. The void left by their father and husband inflicted lasting sorrow on Sarah and Alex, a burden they would carry for the rest of their lives. Sarah, weighed down by sadness and the passage of time, never found another partner, leading a life steeped in loneliness and regret. Her dreams of growing old with John and cherishing moments with their grandchildren became distant, bittersweet memories. When John stopped the support payments after fleeing the country, Sarah's financial stability crumbled, forcing her to work tirelessly to survive. Her nights were filled with tears and sorrow. Meanwhile, John embarked on a new chapter, leaving his past behind. He now had over $600,000 from the sale of the house, and his savings accumulated over the past 25 years. Settling into a new life, he chose the serenity of Portugal. The local women were drawn to his generosity, and he enjoyed their company. 6 months after that harrowing night, John found himself sitting on the beach near his new home in Faro, sipping a cold drink and contemplating his journey. He came to understand that divorce was a part of life, and it was perfectly acceptable to go separate ways and find solace in solitude. What was unacceptable, he realized, was remaining in a place where one was not respected or valued. He made a solemn vow never to let himself be in such a situation again.